We're talking the Miami Dolphins on the Ourlads Football Network, the Ourlads Football YouTube Channel. I'm host Greg DePalma, and hopefully this is going to become a commonplace whenever we talk to Miami Dolphins. We're going to be talking with Jason Sarney of DolphinsTalk.com. And Jason, it was good talking to you earlier this year, and it's good to talk to you even better now because we are just weeks away from the start of the season.
Greg, it's always a pleasure. I appreciate you having me on. Yes, we are close. We're not there just yet, but we're so close, and we have a couple of preseason games. So it's a pleasure to get some football under our belts to start talking about it.
Yeah, a lot going on. And as a matter of fact, every time I come on and talk to an insider, one of the things I do before I come on is just I'll Google the team, just maybe there's something there that I just want to make sure I know what's going on. And so it appears the big story is what's going on with Tua and his former relationship with his coach, or his relationship with his former coach, Brian Flores. Do you think that's just, hey, yeah, that's kind of cool. That's the kind of stuff us writers like to see. We'll get nice clicks. Everybody wants to read that stuff. Do you think that's all that is, or do you think Tua is really bothered by that? Like that was a really tough time for him.
I think he was really bothered by it, and I think that it really was a tough time for him. And he was rather very, very forthright with what he was basically saying, insinuating. And, from my knowledge, when that last year of Flores, when the last final game or so, when things kind of fell off hard. And the relationship it was over. And you know what? You erase that. You don't want to forget it. You kind of put in the rear view. You bring in a new guy, a completely different guy, like a Mike McDaniel, who is picking up to, who's saying, no, you're good. You're great. It's almost like that old SNL skit, I'm great. I'm wonderful. Like, it's almost like Tua needed to do that because he was doing the opposite of that with a previous coach and regime almost. Not regime, coach. And it was just this situation where, kind of metaphorically in life, when you have someone totally behind you, rooting for you, hoping you do well, most people, I would think, tend to do better than someone who is just rooting for you to fail or trying to get proven right that they don't think you're the guy. It's just a very toxic work environment. And he mentioned when you wake up every day and go to work, and when you start a sentence off like that, that's basically saying every single day. That is basically a way of saying every single day I had to deal with something that now he doesn't have to deal with, and look at what's happening.
Yeah. Matter of fact, that really has a lot to do too with, I don't know how much it's going to impact the Dolphins defense this year, but the word was that not necessarily the scheme, but the way Vic Fangio handled the defense, handled the players, the old tough, old school approach. Maybe that wasn't exactly what Mike McDaniel wanted, or it just didn't work. And so they bring in Anthony Weaver, and he's the complete opposite. He's more like Mike McDaniel. Again, from what we hear, more of a player's coach. Are you seeing that? Do you think that was definitely a part of it, or it was all scheme? That's just like icing on cake, or no, that had a lot to do with it.
The whole Vic Fangio thing was kind of an experiment that I think, while it worked from a raw statistical standpoint, if you want to look at the numbers, you could do that, and that's fair. But again, going into work every day, the fellas weren't happy on certain sides and areas of the ball for the defense. Now, the defense is rather different this year if you take away a number of components that are gone. Christian Wilkins, Xavier Howard, Andrew Van Ginkel, Raekwon Davis. The list kind of goes on of that defensive unit where now you got guys like Kendall Fuller, Jordan Brooks, and a bevy of defensive linemen that are coming on into vie for really 3 spots to make up for Christian Wilkins in the aggregate. And then you have Calais Campbell coming on in. So the defense is trying to build this toughness, this inner toughness that they didn't really have, and this bully mindset that I don't think was coached up enough last year to channel it on the field because, for one, Vic Fangio was really absentee. What I mean by that is he didn't really even run his own meetings. Assistants did. He was up in the booth. He wasn't down in the trenches with the fellas. And Weaver's going to be in the thick. Like when it's cold in Cleveland, when it's cold in Green Bay,
Weaver down in that field.
Weaver's going to have the beanie and the gloves on, man. I don't even think he'll have the beanie and the gloves. He's a tough dude. He's a player, as you mentioned. He's got that mindset. He goes bowling with them, like for fun, and they enjoy it. And I'll tell you, last year, if anybody heard that Vic Fangio wanted to go bowling with them, they would have been like, is Vic all right? This guy's head might not be working right now. That didn't happen. So I can't wait to see, and we're seeing trickles of a different defense. Defensive backs are blitzing again. There's exotic packages that we're seeing in the preseason, and we're not even seeing the A team that he has, the starters, and all the bag that he's going to unload this season. So I can't wait.
Well, let's start with the defense then, because that is, obviously that's the biggest change, not just because of the coordinator and the scheme, but the players, and there are some key injuries coming back. The edge, that's an important position, of course, for any defense, and Phillips is now back. Chubb, not yet. They had the misfortune of, gambling, which free agency is, on Shaq Barrett, and that did not work out, unfortunately. That was almost like a stab in the back kind of deal. Not purposeful, but, it's his life. It just really did, I'm sure, that blindsided the Dolphins a little bit. So what do you think about the edge rushing for the Dolphins coming into the beginning of the season? How do you think that that's going to affect them, especially with a new scheme to teach and other players outside the edge rush? But we'll start at the edge.
Well, of course, first you have to start with the medical marvel that is Jalen Phillips. Now, if he is starting, and when I say starting, I don't care if you play snap one, because that's technically you're starting if you're on the field first. It's how many snaps. It's when you're playing the snaps. If Jalen Phillips is on his pass rushing down game, his A game, a year, not even after his Achilles injury, it's unbelievable. He's back practicing, so that's not to be it's said for Bradley Chubb's injury, because he's going to start on the PUP. He's going to miss at least a month. That I could guarantee you. So you're down Chubb. But now you have Jalen Phillips. Let's call it 75% at this exact moment. Maybe we get to like 90, 95 by week one. By week three, hopefully he's full go 100. These rookies that the Dolphins do have, you have Chop Robinson, you have Muhammad Kamara. They're looking the part. I get it that it's preseason. You got to do it up against the actual tier one starters for sure. But to match the offense, these guys are fast. And you're going to see mixed packages for 5, 6 defensive backs on the field at once for Weaver. And one of them is going to be blitzing. In fact, they won both their playoff games preseason games on the last play because they sent the defensive back on a blitz and another defensive back made a play or just had good enough coverage that no one caught the ball and the game was over. So by my count, that's 6 different guys were rushing in terms of defensive back. So maybe they're going to mask the deficiency of those edge rushers being fully ready. They did replace Barrett with Emmanuel Ogbah. So Ogbah, and I'll tell you this, just knowing Emmanuel just for the last couple of years, he was not re-signed. He was basically cut. And then they signed him at a discount after Shaq Barrett. So he's playing with the chip on his shoulder. And to have him and Calais Campbell, they might not necessarily get the sack, but they're 2 of the best in the business at batted balls at the line of scrimmage on 3rd down. Now, that's a deep end metric, but if it's 3rd and 14, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9, and you got a batted ball to cause 4th and a punt, I don't care if it's a sack as well. You got to get the defense off the field, and Calais Campbell and Emmanuel Ogbah don't need the stat of the sack to flip the ball over to the offense. So these guys are terrific at what they do. Anthony Weaver is going to bring pressure almost reminiscent of what the Brian Flores, defensive Brian Flores. Remember, head coach wasn't the best, but as a coordinator and a defensive mind, which he was in Miami, the defensive guru as a head coach, he's phenomenal as a defensive tactician, schemer. We haven't seen anything like that in the last couple of years with Vic Fangio or even Josh Boyer with Miami. So Weaver is going to bring back the exotic blitz, I believe, and that's going to lead to more turnovers, more touchdowns maybe, and it's going to make things easier for the pass rushers because it's going to come from all over the place.
And you better make sure in that situation that you have some good DBs to cover because you're going to get bit whenever you blitz. It's just a matter of how often. And the best teams, of course, won't get bit too often. And with Jalen Ramsey starting the season, that's obviously a big jump for the Dolphins back there. Holland, we know how talented he is. How confident are you with the rest of the secondary? Those are the two big names. Of course, Poyer's in. You mentioned Fuller's in. Cam Smith's a second-year guy, a second-round draft pick. So talk a little bit about the depth of the secondary.
The secondary and cornerback specifically is really my favorite area. Wide receivers on offense, corners in the defensive side of the ball. They have a lot of guys who could really just, let's just call them defensive backs, not CB, not S. I'm very adamant about that because I feel like the Dolphins do that on their depth chart. And they do it with the offensive line as well. They'll just literally say OL for a guy that can cross-train at guard tackle, center guard. You know what I'm saying? So there's a guy like a Nick Needham who should and could start as an outside boundary, a slot, a safety, but he could be a chess piece that rotates with a Jalen Ramsey. When Ramsey plays safety, when Kader Kohu plays the slot, when Kendall Fuller is really your only boundary guy who's just a boundary guy, much like Xavier Howard was, because that's the replacement. Xavier Howard was replaced by Kendall Fuller, who's going to probably stick to the outside. Ramsey is going to be used much more of a chess piece as he would have loved, but Vic Fangio didn't use him to the best of that ability. So you'll see Ramsey on blitzing. You'll see Ramsey as a star. You'll see him, as that nickel and floating defensive back, much like, these safeties that they have on board. Javon Holland could play up at the line of scrimmage. Let's see what Marcus May can do, a free agent. So there's a lot of guys that can do a lot of different things in that secondary. And Weaver is going to implore this, what is it like? It's like a 3-2-5-6 or something like that. They do this really odd scheme that he does. So I can't wait to see what he does with the secondary.
Yeah, I think the Ravens bounced between a 3-3-5 and a 4-2-5, but the 5 was always there. So so you knew that. And speaking of the depth, so Cam Smith didn't play much last year, and you're a second-round pick, so it's put up or shut up time, you would think, in year 2. How's he looking so far?
He had a nice game on Saturday night, but he did finish up in the fourth quarter, grabbing the right. I hate speculating. I'm not a doctor. I don't even want to pretend to play one, but he was holding his right leg. A lot of people were like, hammy. And I'm like, let's just see what's what. So he's going to be nursing that. He's probably not going to play in that Tampa Bay game coming up in the final preseason. And you know what? Will he be ready week 1? I can't answer that yes or no, but he did play well. One of the plays that he made a fantastic pass breakup was with in tandem and Nick Needham pressure off the edge and blitz as a slot nickel. So, it really was fun to see them pressure the passer and rush the quarterback and hurry him to throw. And Cam Smith did his job and made a lunging pass breakup where if it was a reception, it would have been at the Dolphins 5. So it was a good play.
What about the rookie, Patrick McMorris? Has he made any plays so far during the practices, the games? Does it look like he's just one of these guys that will be stashed the back of the roster? We'll see him next year.
He actually had a nice couple of preseason games. The first one in particular, he led the team in tackles. Now, you don't always love to see your defensive back or your safety lead the team in tackles, but a couple of them were up in the line of scrimmage. One of them was for loss at the very least. He was up on coverage and did well, making a pass, defended, and he was just where he needed to be. And he's a guy, I think, your last 5-10 spots of the roster, what can I do with special teams with this person? And he's someone, especially on that dynamic kickoff, I would not be surprised if he's a special teams tackle leader for this team. He should make this ball club because there are actually a couple of injuries that happened on other position rooms that you look where a position room might say, well, I can get away with keeping one more guy. I think an extra defensive back or an extra tight end might benefit the Dolphins with some of these injuries.
You told me when we were talking earlier this year that to keep an eye on Ethan Bonner. Has Bonner had a good camp?
Yes, he has. He is fast as can be. He goes up against Tyreek Hill practice out of practice, when Tyreek is playing, of course. So that's the iron sharpens what you hope is iron. And Bonner had one not good graded play that you can go back to if you look at the grade, but he was face masked off the line of scrimmage, which wasn't called on the first preseason game. He had a terrific game, but he gave up a long play for like 40 yards, but he was totally – it should have been an unsportsmanlike conduct, a face mask on the offensive player. And other than that, he's been flawless. The coaches love him. Players love him. I think he's going to make this team.
Okay. And before we move on from the secondary, Marcus May, what's his role on the team going to be?
It's an interesting situation. Now, May, I think, started a little slow, in camp, but he's come on lately. Listen, this is a guy, I think every game he's played, he's been a starter, if I'm not mistaken, in his NFL career. He's had some injury woes. But again, with the amount of safeties, which could be 3 at one time that Weaver likes to use, I'm sure he'll be on the field. And again, the starter situation, I don't like hearing the word starter. It doesn't matter. Give me 70, 80% snaps. And that's how I know you're a significant player. Not the first series, not the first snap, fourth quarter, third down. When are you playing the real money snaps? So I think May might be one of those guys with Jordan Poyer where if you kind of mash them together, it's a 4-year in all pro safety, But again, this is a situation in the aggregate that Weaver's going to rotate his safeties, rotate his D linemen. So you might not have needed to pay a free agent safety like a Brandon Jones, who said goodbye to, or pay a defensive lineman like Christian Wilkins or a Raekwon Davis. So making up for things in the aggregate, it's like Billy Bean Moneyball all of a sudden.
Speaking of Wilkins, how much do you think the Dolphins are going to miss him? And how best do you think are they going to go around trying to not miss him? Like who could step up and try to fill his shoes in some way?
Well, the funny thing is, I do truly believe that there might not be a huge drop-off in the Dolphins' overall defense, but to me, it's getting interior sacks as well as stopping the run. That's the metric, because of all his peers last year, and I'm talking Quinnen Williams, Dexter Lawrence, all those guys, there wasn't a team outside of the Dolphins that were a top 7 rush defense, and that was very much what Christian Wilkins specialized in with Zach Sealer. So Zach Sealer, if he has to become the new Christian Wilkins and the Dolphins have to find the new Zach Sealer, I could deal with that math. But then you have Calais Campbell, who is not so much of a drop-off from Christian Wilkins. He's just 10 years older, essentially. So can we get 60% of a 75% Calais Campbell as a veteran? That math still works out to better than 40% of the defensive tackles out there in my money. So I love who they brought in. Another Christian Wilkins is not on this team, and the Neville Gallimores, the Benito Joneses, the Deshaun Hands, these other guys, these Jags that I don't mean offensively, but that's who they are. Brandon Pilley is a guy who was undrafted last year. He got in on a sack in the preseason game against the Commanders. Dolphin fans out there, if you remember Paul Soliai, this is Paul Soliai light, Brandon Pilley. Same guy, minus the hair, shorter hair. But that's the guy.
And a vowel or two.
There it is. Exactly right.
Yeah. Okay, so what about those 2 pass rushers, those 2 rookie pass rushers, Chop Robinson and Kamara? How are they looking?
Chop is fast. I mean, Chop is NASCAR fast. And if he is used as rumor has it, like a Micah Parsons, because that's the name I've heard that could be the best comp, which is music to the ears, that would be phenomenal. If I'm going to, we all expect that from a first round draft pick. So I don't want to go like too crazy or too, every first round draft pick, especially 21st, he should be able to contribute right away. So how much he contributes, the sky is the limit for him. He is uncapped potentially. He has to refine a couple of obviously things in the game, but his speed is uncoachable. And the Dolphins drafted 2 of the top 3 fastest edges. Muhammad Kamara is right there too with the speed. He's smaller, and you could see it. Like, he's a smaller kind of one of those chip on the shoulder guys that's going to say, I don't care if I'm smaller than you. I'm going to beat you anyway. And I think this guy is going to be bang for your buck. Probably the Dolphins' most productive draft pick. He was a 5th rounder, a day 3er that I think in 3, 4, 5 years' time, he could be one of those gems and finds that the Dolphins happen to hit and find in that day 3 area. Every now and again, there is an absolute diamond in the rough that becomes a lifelong or an absolute cult followed Dolphin, and I think Kamara is on his way for that.
And I agree with you. I really love that pick, and I think that that was a great spot to get him. Brooks. So what is his job? Is it basically to? You talked about blitzing. Is that why they brought him in? Is they really felt that he'd be able to help in that one key role, attack from the middle? Because he's kind of one of those hard players to read unless you watch him every week, because he can put up numbers, but you don't know what the numbers represent. Sometimes numbers are numbers. How do you think he's going to fit in?
It's weird. Like, the Dolphins used to have middle linebackers that would get like sacks or it's now run stopping that these linebackers, I think, have to really be very keen on. And between him and David Long, I think you're going to get 2 great thumpers in the middle. Brooks probably will have a little bit more of a propensity to get a sack here or there, but you got 2 guys who can make 100 tackles in that interior of the second level of the Dolphins linebacking core. So yep. Brooks replaces essentially Jerome Baker. And I think, with all due respect to Jerome, it's an upgrade. So if you want, Jerome Baker's a name on defense last 5-6 years as a captain style player. So you get a better physical player who I think, if you cast a middle linebacker in a movie, Jordan Brooks is going to be in the casting room. Like that, he just looks like that. He plays like that stereotypical middle-ish inside linebacker. And I really like his game, and I think he improves what the Dolphins had last year, trying to find that right guy next to David Long. Had a fantastic year, and Long is in a contract year. So when you put those 2 together, I think that's a very nice combination for that second level, interior-wise.
Let's talk about the offense. And a couple of guys we see here on the Ourlads depth chart in red, meaning they're on the pup. So what is the prognosis for both Beckham and Wynn?
The Dolphins have the best colors in the NFL in orange and aqua, but we all hate red. We fear red because that's what destroys this team recently. Has been horrible injuries, early injuries, late injuries. These are actually significant. Isaiah Wynn mainly. Odell you get what you pay for. Odell's probably going to be eased in. Yeah. He's at the latter part of his career. You're not expecting 17 games at all. I said it at 13 is that's good. You give me 13 games from him, eventually I'm happy. And I have him missing maybe the first month. But Isaiah Wynn is another injury-prone guy who, when he was playing at left guard, he was rather good, very, very good. But you can't rely on him. So I can't put him in, even in pencil, as starting week 1 at left guard. It's just not looking like it's going to be. So is it Liam Eichenberg? But there's a problem with Aaron Brewer with his hand. So you hope that Aaron Brewer is ready to roll, or else will it be Eichenberg at center, forcing then maybe Robert Jones to move from right guard to left guard. And then you got Jack Driscoll moving. That's what the Dolphins offensive line is. It's a sick game of musical chairs that their coordinator, Butch Barry, has done well in 12 different combinations last year. And that was with Connor Williams and Robert Hunt. So those 2 guys are not coming back. So on the inside of this line, there's holes to begin with. So with that red of Isaiah Wynn, it does make things rather scary. The only good aspects of this line problem is that it's masked with Mike McDaniel and Tua Tagovailoa getting the ball out quick and just doing those motions and getting it to the running backs, getting it out of his hands very, very quickly. It's when he keeps it and has to improv and sit in the pocket. No bueno.
It also helps when you run the zone blocking scheme. I know a lot of teams are using it now, but back in the day when it used to be a lot of power and the zone blocking was in the minority, a lot of times you would see teams do that, especially if they didn't have good offensive line play. That was how you masked it. And either way, it still helps in general when you're offensive, because you don't really, when you run, if you run, because it's about, as you know, it's about a flow, everybody together, running in tandem. And if you do that properly and you're coached up properly, sort of like the San Francisco 49ers, hey, you have one star tackle. The rest of the guys are, doesn't matter. They could be successful running that scheme. And I think that's exactly what the Dolphins look like, because, I mean, the other thing, speaking of injury, not being able to count on someone is, at least Armstead's playing about 800 snaps a year on average lately, but it would be nice to have him around as much as possible. And then the team went out and spent a second-round pick on Patrick Ball, which makes a lot of sense considering Armstead, we just talked about him not always being available for the entire season and is also getting up there in age.
Armstead, again, is another 13 to 15 game guy that if you could give me that contract right now, I'll sign it and just hope that it's 15. And the 2 games that he might miss are just healthy scratch. Week 18, they lock it up. But the Patrick Paul pick was a future pick. He is developmental. He's tremendous. He's the biggest guy on the field. He's noticeable. His reach is top tier. But he's got to work on anchoring. He's got to work on setting himself. He actually gave up a really rough play against the Commanders, played well against the Falcons. But he is a guy that, in a year's time could be on his way to being a potential Pro Bowler. But this offensive line, it's scary. It really, truly is. And they decided to not draft a right guard. They decided to not, draft a center. So this is... this could bite them, or they could look like geniuses with what Butch Barry is going to mask together. But we'll see. There's a couple of guys that I have some higher hopes for and developing. I mentioned the Jack Driscoll, Robert Jones. These are guys you want to root for. But to think that there's going to be 5 straight guys consistently week in and week out, I think we're dreaming.
As far as the skill position players, I guess the idea, or the logical idea is that Mostert, dealing with his age, having a big season, will come back down to life a little bit. And again, hopefully he stays healthy. That's been an issue for Mostert over his career. But what do you think with Wright being drafted and in San Francisco before they were able to get McCaffrey? They were pretty much a committee kind of deal. So are you still looking at another year of a committee? Do you think that's what we're going to see? Or will one of these running backs end up as the number 1 top dog?
This day and age, I feel like the 20 carry back is so few and far between. And I think that Mike McDaniel loves Raheem Mostert from his days together in San Francisco. So I don't want to say he's the lead guy, but I think he is the captain of the running back room still. Now, is he going to score 21 touchdowns? No.
Yeah.
Also, that's because the Dolphins now have 3-4 extra players they didn't have last year who could be that 3rd or 4th option outside of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. There's not the necessity a lot of these runs and plays were nice and long plays, but Raheem was the inside the 20 guy, inside the 10 guy, and Devon Achane is so talented, and he's going to be used in a little bit more of a receiving way than Mostert will. I do truly believe that you could put 50 receptions as the basement for Achane, because he's going to be in the slot. They lined him out wide. They lined him out totally towards the sideline, and they utilized him and got a 12-yard, 13-yard play. So this guy's going to be all over. Jalen Wright, he's the next Mostert. I think that in a year or two, Jalen Wright gets the Mostert reps, but that's not saying that Achane's not going to be valuable. They're both going to touch the ball that 12 to 14 time range.
And what have you seen from them? right? You like what you see. You think he's going to get a significant amount of carries this season for a rookie? Or do you expect, with Jeff Wilson being another veteran, that Wright will be taken along pretty slowly?
Great question. He's fast as can be. Right. If he gets to the outside, good night, nurse. So there might be a home run hit, Now, Chris Brooks' last preseason game on Saturday night went down with what they're saying is concussion. Not so sure what's going on. They dropped Savon Ahmed today, and they signed Anthony McFarland, who I believe is just going to be, a camp rep, because the Dolphins were rushing with undrafted free agents Saturday night because Brooks got hurt. Jalen Wright did not dress on Saturday night. I think they saw all they need to see of him week one of the preseason, and in camp he's been impressing. So when he touches the ball, let's call it 3 to 5 times a game, I think that he's going to do quite well. And when it is time for Raheem to pass the torch, I don't think it's going to be Achane as the number one running back. I think it's going to be Wright and Achane as that thunder and lightning, but they're both lightning bolts. So you put the ball in both their hands in certain times that benefits them and their skill sets in different situations. And again, with Achane's ability to play slot, X, Y, Z, everywhere off the field, Wright's more of that traditional halfback. You know what I mean?
Yep. And what we're talking about now, of course, is also intriguing to fantasy fans. They want to know.
We didn't mention the biggest intrigue of them all just yet, and that's not to go ahead on the outline here. But Jonnu Smith, man, I'll tell you, if you're looking for a tight end 2 in fantasy to draft, and then by week 4 you're like, all right, good problem to have. I need to trade my tight end 1 because I need to get Smith up there because I love his production. He's going to be utilized as a pass catcher, of course, a halfback. They're going to give him the ball as a wide receiver, tight end, running. He's going to be all over the place. And his yards after the catch for his career is much like George Kittle. They're the only 2 since 2018 through last season that's over 7 yards after catch on average per reception. So that's elite in that category.
Yeah, it's amazing. He didn't score a touchdown last year with those kind of stats. Because you're right. But now he's got Tua, and he's got this offense.
Well, Smith last year was good touchdown-wise. The Dolphins didn't score a touchdown last year as the tight end. No Dolphin tight end scored a touchdown last year, and that was
that's right. Yes, that's right. That's it. Because Smythe had 35 receptions, but no touchdowns. And
correct.
Okay. Talk about the wide receiver depth, because actually, speaking of fantasy, in my dynasty league, man, I was this close a couple of times to drafting Malik Washington. This close. And I kind of regret not doing it. But I mean, I like the guys I picked, but you can't have them all. So what do you like? And because I've been hearing good things about how he's looked so far in Washington. And that's important too, because again, Beckham, you can't count on him really. And there's just not a whole lot of depth on paper once you get past Waddle and Hill. So tell me otherwise. Tell me some, Craycraft. I don't know. I know Berrios, but tell me how the depth is going to round into shape for the Dolphins this season.
Well, the injury bug has bitten minorly, but in a substantial way for the Dolphins. River Craycraft is going to be out for a significant time. He really could have been a guy who was the third that third receiver that Tua really secured this season. Braxton Berrios, gritty, tough guy, punt returner, kick returner candidate. As for Malik Washington, I think he has nuzzled himself into that returner role, both kickoff and punt, because he's a football player. Even the broadcast, the local CBS broadcasters were talking up how Tyreek and Jalen Waddle were talking up Malik Washington, of him just doing his job. He's a fantastic blocker, helping out, running backs in their, progressions, getting to the next level. He's just a football player. So he's a dynasty stash and a half. And if the Dolphins want to really find a slot candidate, that's your guy. He made his bones last year in college as the best, probably one of the best slot receivers in the country. So I think we're going to see a lot of him in special teams, and I hope that he gets his few targets, hopefully in the slot, and could be a screen candidate too. I know they love their screens in Miami.
So you think that he's actually going to again with the new rules? It's basically going to be Berrios and Washington then back there.
I think that's a good outlook right now. Berrios, okay. Washington, and I think that they should put Washington back as punt returner. Wouldn't shock me if they start with Berrios back there, but Washington's a guy. He's 5'8", but he's just shifty and quick. And if he gets lost in those blockers and that dynamic kickoff, one juke, one move, one good block, good night. And that's 6 or 7 guys on the Dolphins you could say that about.
Give me a college free agent that is making the coaches stand up, take notice.
Okay, it's not a fantasy guy. So fantasy owners and managers, do not put this on me. Hayden Rutsche is a blocker. He is a tight end that could be an absolute stud for Mike McDaniel because he loves those tight ends who can block. And he can catch the ball when his number is called. He was, yes, he was the leading tight end pass catcher for the Wisconsin Badgers, but he only had 12 more catches than I did last year. There's not a lot of repetition that they had with the Badgers in that college offense, but Rutsche is an NFL pedigreed kid. His dad, his grandfather played in the NFL, and he is doing everything right from a grading, blocking standpoint where you're not going to get the statistic, but he's going to help other people get the statistic. He is a dark horse for me with all these other injuries.
Wow.
Watch out for Hayden Rutsche.
Okay. So out of all the college free agents, he's going with Hayden Rutsche. I like it.
I wanted to give a good name because I like a lot of other people, but I'm trying to jump into the mindset of what this team loves to reward,
Well, usually one can make the team. It's hard for more than one. It doesn't mean it can't happen, but maybe he's the guy. Okay. So
if I have to say one other position that it might happen is the cornerback, because a couple of them have been playing really well. Storm Duck, Jason Maitre, Isaiah Johnson. It would not shock me if they kind of repeat their undrafted free agent tendencies and bring one of those DBs. Storm Duck playing real well. Isaiah Johnson's also kind of like a prototypical 6'3". He's big, he's powerful, he can tackle. So there's a couple of candidates.
Give me a breakthrough player that has yet to make it, but this is the year. He might be a 1-year player, a 2-year player. Jonu's a ninth one, but he's a little older, so we need somebody who's a little bit younger.
A little bit younger. Great question. I would have to say, I'm going to say Brandon Peely on the defensive line because he's a second-year undrafted free agent, and I love his ability to just be in the right spot, be a presence, allowing other people to get to the ball carrier, to get to the quarterback.
Do the dirty work.
Is nonstop. Exactly right. So if there's a year 2 guy to take a massive leap, then I'll be okay. If I miss on this, I'll miss on an undrafted. That's okay. But Cam Smith should be the answer as a second rounder. But with that hammy, I can't put him there just yet. But that should be the answer. Is Cam Smith needs to go from the least played second rounder in the NFL last year. That's the fact. He was the least snap-counted second-round drafted player last year, and that's a miss as a draft, but you hope he could be that guy. But I like Brandon Peely's game. Paul Soley, I like. Give me Peely.
And is this it for Channing?
2 sacks in the preseason, 1 in each game. He's got a lot of – I'll tell you this much right now. Duke Riley and Channing Tindall won't both be on this team. If I have to pick one, give me Tindall.
I don't. Yeah, if they had to flip the coin there, they have to go with Tindall. I know Riley's. Who's better on special teams?
If that's the question, I'll give the edge to Riley. But with the new dynamic kickoff rules And if you want a guy to get to point A to point B faster when the whistle kind of blows, because you can't run until a certain point on this new dynamic kickoff. It's a different special teams look for kickoff. So with Channing Tindall's raw speed to get from point A to point B quicker, I would like his overall football ability to be channeled and harnessed better because he has that ability, I would hope. But I picked Channing Tindall over Riley, even if Riley is a better traditional special teams player. These new rules, I think one player is going to emerge everywhere from each team. A player is going to emerge who is a key on this new dynamic kickoff on both sides of the ball. Returning
and Tyndall's a draft pick, so that's also
exactly.
That's also going to help. And you know what? This might be the perfect scheme change fit for Tyndall as well. Sometimes that's all you need. Usually it happens when you leave and you go to another team and another coach and so forth. But sometimes you're on the same team and the coach comes to you. And maybe this is exactly what Tyndall needs all along to jumpstart his career. Before I let you go, how's the kicking game looking? It's going to be solid.
It's the part of the game that a lot of people overlook. I love it. It creates actually a massive amount of stress for me because the Dolphins, at times, it could be phenomenal. Jason Sanders could be a 55-plus machine, but sometimes he gets a little wide right, wide left. He'll never miss short. He's got the leg. I don't care what his Madden rating is. It's atrocity that he wasn't higher, but that's besides the point. He's got a leg. He actually is a clutch kicker, too. He's him and I believe, I forget who it is, maybe Hopkins, the two most clutch kickers inside of 2 minutes. They both hit 10 in a row. Their last 10 kicks inside the fourth quarter with 2 minutes left during overtime. Sanders does convert when, that's huge. He's a money, cold as ice kicker when the lights are on and when he needs to be. So he's safe. Even though he missed a 49-yarder against the Commanders, it would have been good from 60 if it was just a little slightly over. Like, he has the leg. Jake Bailey had one all-pro year. He's not terrific lately, but they like him. He's a good holder, and I think they're going to stick with that duo. They do have a great long snapper in Blake Ferguson if we really want to go in-depth, but he always does his job very, very well, Blake. So shout out to Blake. Excellent.
Awesome, Jason. I appreciate it. Give me a prediction. What are you feeling about the team this season for which is, last year, it's kind of step one and away. Tua had a huge year, stayed healthy. Team got banged up as the season wore on. That always sucks because you just can't control that. And now it's a reboot. And this is an open division because the Bills are definitely vulnerable. And as a Jet fan, and I know but I don't want to scare off anybody in Miami. But fact is, they've already asked me a bunch of times on other shows, and I'm like, I don't care how good I think the Jets might be this year. If Aaron Rodgers is healthy, you have to pick them third. You have to respect the Bills and the Dolphins because they've been there and they've done that, and they've got talent as well, if not more talent. So what do you think? It's time to win the division. Is that the year you're thinking? Are you feeling? Or are you thinking that the Bills, not only should you respect them, but that's going to be a hard team to overcome, and I think that's going to be the difference. To tell you the truth, is whoever wins that division, much better shape. Nowadays, it's really hard to not win a division and make a run.
They're a team that plays their best football at home. So it almost punches a ticket for real Super Bowl contention if they could win one game at home, 2 games at home, and then just go to the Super Bowl. That would be phenomenal. Now, none of this is real unless the Dolphins beat the Bills. Now, they get a chance to do that week 2 under the lights Thursday night at home. If the Dolphins beat the Bills Thursday night, week 2, and they move to 2-0, now we're talking. They need to stop the mobile quarterback. They need to stop the tight end. They need to stop the teams with having mobile quarterback and the tight end. And that's the Bills. That's the Ravens. That's the Chiefs. Lo and behold, that's the AFC for you. And until they could do that, CJ Stroud, you know what I mean? These teams, Anthony Richardson, these teams and these quarterbacks, they, on 3rd and long, have picked up first downs with their feet and to the tight end, to the Dolphins for a decade. It has not been figured out. It's not. And nothing is real until those things, winning on the road, beating the Bills on the road, stopping the mobile quad. That's all the Bills. Every one of these things is exactly the Buffalo Bills. And if you are hosting them, there's no excuse anymore to not beat them. And they only have won in the last couple of years at home, which was by the skin of their teeth. The Dolphins took the last play for Josh Allen to make a poor throw for them to win a couple of years ago. And last year, of course, they didn't finish the job and they lost in a horrible way. And it cost them everything. Frankly, it cost them potentially hosting a game. It got the Bills into the playoffs and it sent Miami to Kansas City. Disaster all around. So I got them at 11 wins. I think that's fair. It's all depending on if the Bills with 11 wins, probably the tiebreaker goes to Miami is where the division's going to go. And I am scared of the Jets. I'm not scared of them, but health is so important for Aaron Rodgers. And they scheduled about 7 of those national televised games before week 8.
It's ridiculous.
It almost tells me that the NFL is, let's get them all in. Let's get them all in.
Yeah. The only reason I'm okay with it is because as being, like you, a part of the business, I get to push that aside for, I'll get to that later tonight or tomorrow night or whatever. And I get to just zero in on all the other teams in the NFL, which is good. I like that because when your team is playing, you're missing, like, especially at 1:00 or something, it's like you're missing like 60-70% of the weekend. Not that you can't rewind and watch it, which nowadays we can a lot easier, and I do, but it's just not being able to get that, like, as it happens. It's a lot easier when your team's playing on national TV. So that's the good part. But yeah, that's just ludicrous. The amount of nationally televised games
it's completely strategic. I get it, but It just tells me that the NFL, if gun to their head, they ask how many games Aaron Rodgers is going to play, 10, and who knows?
All right. So Jason, tell us, besides DolphinsTalk.com, where could we find you podcasting?
I do a couple of podcasts on DolphinsTalk.com. One with Zach Krantz. He's a radio personality down there, and another with Marissa Marino. She really does some terrific interviews in her own right. She's, interviewed players, interviewed TV personalities, so lucky to be in their podcast rotation and just, hanging out on Twitter, just doing my thing in the Dolphins community. It's a great community. Just a shout out to a terrific fan, Lisa Siegel. She actually got shouted out by Jalen Phillips on the sideline of the broadcast on Saturday night. The Dolphin fan base is really home to many terrific fans, and they were really shouted out as a whole by a couple of different people in that broadcast. So shout out to the Dolphin fans out there, and everyone's clamoring for success, and it's very apparent. You could smell that it's desperation. All of us, it's admitted. We're ready for a winner. Yeah. Everyone's ready.
I hear you. And it's like, all right, the Bills and the Chiefs and even the Ravens, speaking as Dolphins and Jet fans, it's like, all right, enough.
It's good for football.
Yeah.
It's good for football. Like Cleveland and Detroit, I'd rather pull for than, Pittsburgh. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
or Kansas City and San Francisco again. Yeah.
Out with the old, in with the new. And unfortunately, we're in that. We're in that bucket. We're in that bucket. Football cyclical.
You gonna make a trip down to Miami this year?
Yeah, I'll be there for that Bills game. Cool. The family always gets down there for the last week or so of December, and I believe that falls on the 49ers game. So at least 2 for me this year.
Nice. Jason, I look forward to talking to you during the season. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk before a Jet game. Not sure when that's going to be. If Aaron Rodgers is healthy, if he's not, the networks and myself could put our heads between our legs and. the rest. But anyway, I look forward to talking to you at least a few more times this season, and I think it's going to be a fun season for both of us, or at least I hope so.
Absolutely, Greg. Anytime. Appreciate you having me on, my man.
Thanks, Jay.